Hello and welcome to the Supercast. I'm your host, Superintendent Anthony Godfrey. They are elementary school students who simply love storytelling and getting in front of the microphone to share their stories with everyone who will listen. On this episode of the Supercast, we head to Falcon Ridge Elementary School, where a student-produced podcast called the Junior Falcons is giving everyone involved the opportunity to tell stories in a way that is fun and educational, fostering new skills that they can take into future careers. Find out what happens when we show up to record a podcast during the Junior Falcons podcast. We're at Falcon Ridge talking with Principal Teresa Christensen. I'm about to go on your student podcast.
Yes, we're excited.
Tell me about the podcast.
Well, so it started 3 years ago. We had some students that were outside doing interviews on the playground, and they wanted to do a podcast and came and said, can we do a podcast? And I had no idea how to do it. Went to a training in St. George, and they said, just do it. So I bought an old mic, and we just started a podcast. So we've actually grown from there, and it's been something we've done every year with our 5th and 6th grade students.
So it began as an underground, unauthorized podcast.
Yes, it
grew
was.
into a fully endorsed podcast.
Yes, one where we can control a little bit more of what's happening.
And what were the interviews about?
They were interviewing other students, asking what they were doing. And I said, let's take this on a grander scale. And they started interviewing faculty. They've gone out and interviewed people in the community, things that they're fascinated about. They've had a couple of podcasts where they've had discussions over movies they've wanted to see, or they did a poll of what kind of a lunchtime should we have? Should we have recess first? Or so it's really something that's grown from what the students want to talk about.
I'm trying to remember whether we had a podcast at my elementary in the 70s. No, I don't think we did.
I didn't have one in mine either.
No, it's really exciting, and it's a great way for them to engage with other students, faculty members, and to have their voice be heard.
And do research. They've researched things out, and they search for things to share in the community.
Now, how do students get the opportunity to be part of the podcast crew?
So in the beginning, it was a group of boys that came to me. So that first year, I said, hey, let's do it, and brought them in. And then the next year, they wanted to really continue the podcast. They'd moved on to 7th grade. And so we did interviews, and we had applications come in. They did interviews with us, and basically they conducted a podcast of us and did interview questions, and we kind of based it off of their ability to ask questions, to carry a conversation, and do research. And so this year, these 4 students are the ones that were chosen to be our podcast team.
Is it pretty competitive?
Yeah, actually it was. It's really hard to narrow it down when you've got so many good candidates. Ashlyn is the only one that was on last year as a 5th grader, and she's on this year as a 6th grader, and then the other 3 are all new.
Tell me, how frequently does the podcast get posted?
We try to do it once a week, but obviously with breaks and things in there, but we at least have 2 or 3 podcasts a month.
That's awesome. That's frequent.
Mm-hmm.
I know personally that takes a lot of work.
It does. And it's a lot of work on the kids' part as well, because they're the ones that have to come up with a podcast every single week, and who are they going to interview, and questions and that type of thing. So they've been awesome about it.
Do you think I'm in for some tough questions?
I think you are in for some tough questions.
Okay. I'm as ready as I'll ever be, I guess.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome.
Sound check, just to make sure that our mics are on.
Okay. Am I in the right spot?
Go ahead and just start whatever you want to say.
Care Bear, Care Bear, Care Bear.
Perfect. So we're good to go. Do you guys already figured out who's doing your intro, who's doing your outro?
Yeah, so Ashlyn's doing intro, he's doing outro.
And Alex has got our outro. Fantastic. Okay, and we know the order where we're doing our quick introducing ourselves.
Ashlyn will go first.
And then going around the circle. Perfect. You guys ready? 3, 2.
Welcome, Junior Falcons. Today we will be interviewing our superintendent, Mr. Godfrey. Let's get into it then. So, Mr. Godfrey, how long have you been being a superintendent?
This is my 5th year as superintendent. I started in 2019. We're talking now with the Junior Falcon podcasters who just put me through an excellent interview. Introduce yourselves and just say what grade you're in.
My name is Evodio. I'm in 5th grade. Alex Castro, and I'm in 5th grade.
My name is Camry, and I'm in 5th grade.
My name is Ashlyn, and I'm in 6th grade.
All right, we've got 5th and 6th graders here. I'm so impressed. You guys have a great setup here, and you have great chemistry. You're able to play off of each other and kind of signal to each other and keep the flow of the podcast going. And I think we've been doing it. This is my 5th year podcasting, but the school's been doing a podcast for about 3 years now, and I think it's super cool that you guys do this. Tell me what made you want to be a part of this podcast. I know there's a whole tryout and everything. Tell me what made you want to be a part of the podcast.
So what made me want to be a part of the podcast is I'm a huge talker. I love talking. And I like to get to know people. And that's pretty much it. I wanted to get to know, like, people in younger grades than me, but not at the time. But now I get to know people in younger grades than me, like these people. Lovely people.
I kind of came here for the same reason Asha did, because I love talking and I just wanted to meet some new people. But another reason is because my parents thought it would be a good idea, since when I get home I don't really do anything. So
Okay.
it's kind of like just an after school thing for me to do. But I love it, and I'm kind of glad I did sign up and made it onto the team.
Great.
I wanted to be on podcasts because I am a huge talker, like they both said. But I also have, like, the kind of personality where you are curious about random things and you ask the randomest questions, but not everyone has the answer to. But it's cool finding people that do have the answer to.
Great.
The reason I joined podcast is because I was going to join student council, but they already emptied all the spots. That's why I joined podcast.
So you thought, well, student council's full. I'm going podcast. I'm going with the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. What do you love most about being able to be on a podcast here at your elementary school?
What I love about being on a podcast at my own elementary school, whoa, I'm almost saying the ABCs, is, like, I don't know, I kind of want to have a podcast when I'm older and just, like, talk about stuff, random topics that I'm curious about, and this is where I can kind of start it and maybe carry it on.
So this is maybe the start of something even bigger down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I like most about podcasts is probably when we get to have new people come in that I've never met before, and I just have a lot of questions. And you can kind of think of your own stuff rather than having someone really tell you what to do. And that's a really big part for me.
Great, because the conversation kind of flows naturally and you're able to just ask questions as they come.
Yeah.
I really joined because I wanted to meet new people and make some new friends, but it was also because I also kind of thought that maybe if I did this, I could start my own podcast and maybe make it a little bit bigger. And just, yeah. I like podcasts because I get to know new people, like them. As I'm here in my class.
So not just meeting the people that you get to make the podcast with, but also the people that you get to interview.
Yeah.
Is it easier to talk to people now that you've been talking to people all year for the podcast? Is it easier to walk up and talk to people that you don't know?
Well, I think it's easier sitting down and having a podcast because then you're, like, face to face, like, talking.
Right.
And you can ask them questions that you normally wouldn't ask, like, about them
Sure.
when you just randomly walk up to them. So, yeah.
So it gives you an excuse to talk to new people.
Yeah.
Makes it so they can't run away.
So
That's true.
what have you learned from being part of the podcast?
We should.
I learned that about conversation threads and how if you give just one idea for a conversation, that conversation won't last that long. So you want to give more parts of the conversation, more like ideas for them to talk about with the conversation.
Well, you did that with me, and you did a great job of it.
My friend here stole all my ideas I was going to say.
I know that does happen.
It, like, thinking of new questions or questions to ask on the spot because I wasn't here last week to plan. So I think it gives me, like, I can be more creative and go, like, out of the box that I'm usually in and, like, find different things to ask, and follow-up questions are huge on our podcast. So
I like that. A good follow-up question is as important as an initial question, sometimes even more so. But what is one of your favorite interviews on the podcast?
Kind of a long time ago. I'm not really sure, but I don't know if we were interviewing anybody. I think we were just like starting the podcast, and there was this kid named Cole.
Okay.
And there's this one episode that he opened the door to leave, and it made this huge creaking sound, and the mics picked it up, and it was so funny. We all just like laughed. That's like one of my favorites.
Did that make it a scary episode? Or
No, it wasn't scary.
It wasn't like this creepy.
He was trying to open it slow so it wouldn't make a noise, but we found out opening it faster would not let it not make a noise.
Science, you learn things. Okay. It's those unexpected moments, it sounds like, that have been really fun. How about for you?
My favorite episode wasn't that long ago, but was when we interviewed one of the newer teachers to the school. Her name was Mrs. Sarah, and she just had a lot of really funny things to say. And we talked about her dog, and she was a huge Swiftie. So we talked about that and just some of the things she was doing in her class.
Great. So you got to know a new teacher and her dog.
Mine is this one. I'm going to talk to you.
I was hoping that one of you would say this was your favorite. Thank you for backing me up. Now, this has been a blast for me to get to talk with each of you, and you're naturals. You are all so good at this. So whatever ambition you have beyond this, I'm sure you're going to be successful at it. And I love the idea that you just want to get to know other people through the podcast. That's really it. If you're curious about other people, that's where you're successful as a podcaster, I think.
I also think it like makes you step out of your comfort zone if you're not one that like really likes to talk to other people, but you like to talk. It makes you step out of your comfort zone trying something new.
You guys are awesome. I'm so impressed. And thank you very much for having me on your podcast. It's an honor. If people want to listen to your podcast, which I'm sure they do after hearing this one, where do they go? How do they find your podcast?
So you can go on Spotify and just type up the Junior Falcons podcast.
Okay.
And Falcon Ridge Junior Falcons podcast. But you can just look up there, and you can either search for each season. So you can either go to one of our older seasons, or this season, which is a newer season. Newest season.
I'm just saying, while you're there, you should just like follow us on Spotify. You should.
So don't just listen, follow.
You're so close, you're already playing it. You can just
hit it one more time.
Hit that follow button.
Yeah.
Be part of the community.
Mm-hmm. And you can get notified when we post our new episodes.
You're all fantastic. I'm so impressed. And if I ever need a co-host, I have a deep bench right here.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot for spending time with me. I appreciate you staying after school and talking with me. Good luck with the podcast going forward. And you've got at least one new listener. That's me. Stay with us. When we come back, we talk with the advisor for the Junior Falcons podcast.
Hello, I'm Sandy Reescraft, Director of Communications for Jordan School District, and we want to invite you to connect with us. So many exciting things are happening in your child's school, your neighbor's school, in every school here every day. Don't miss out on following the fun or simply staying informed when there's important information we need to share. Join us at jordandistrict.org or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Jordan District. We can't wait to connect.
We're talking now with Mariah Stout, one of the fourth grade teachers here at Falcon Ridge and the podcast advisor. Thanks for giving us this opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you. Like we're super excited to have this to talk with you, and the kids were super excited, and we're so glad that we were able to be on your podcast.
Well, I loved being on theirs. They're very impressive. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the progress they've made since they first auditioned and were chosen.
So huge gains. So what's cool is that when they first come to their tryout podcast or their podcast tryout, you see them on the one-on-one, and what's interesting is then from there they get put into groups, and then they play off of each other. And it's interesting because you'll get kids that they pair up and they're like, oh, I don't really know you very well. So when you listen at the very beginning, you can hear there's a little bit of awkwardness because it's just everybody's trying to fill each other out. But then from there, what we do is then we kind of talk about like, what were some good things that happened? Hey, did we know good things that happened, and things that they hear, they're like, oh, yeah, we can work on that. But also we look at different examples of other podcasts, and even some videos of like how to have a conversation. And it's great because, as you know, it's like Alex talked about, conversational threads. It was one of the videos that we watched about how to have a conversation, and even encouraging them like, hey, go practice with your friends, go practice with family. And they've made huge gains. Like even coming up, like you probably noticed that some of them were pointing at each other like, oh, hey, I'm going to ask the next question. Because we've had a group that's like, oh, we don't want to over talk each other. So that's what we're going to do so that we don't do that. So it's been great because I don't tell them explicitly what to do. They're the ones who've come up with that. Or if there's something where I'm like, oh, yeah, that's something that we can work. We'll talk about it. We'll see videos. We'll practice with each other. Yeah. And then the next time, like they're able to apply it, and it's awesome.
They really do seem to have a great relationship. They're able, and they're respectful of each other. Like, oh, I want you to have a chance. Let's make sure they have a chance. So I think they each have their voice, and they're able to balance things out. There are just so many skills that they're obviously developing as part of putting this podcast together, that skills that will serve them for a long time to come.
Yeah, indeed. And the best part is, you, especially when you hear from the beginning to where they are now, getting them to listen to understand instead of just like, oh, I'm asking this question and then I'm just going to move on to the next thing without actually listening. And so like getting it to where, especially where we've hit up on like, hey, make sure you're having follow-up questions to show that you're actually listening. Like that's been fantastic. Just getting their listening skills, not just their hearing skills, but their listening skills to be able to help with that communication.
I could tell that they had been really intentional about focusing on asking good follow-up questions because there was a great flow to that interview with them. I hated when you gave the signal that it was that it needed to wrap up because I was having so much fun with it. They did such a great job.
I know. I was sad too. I was like, oh man, do we have to stop now? Like this is fantastic.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun, and they just light up when they're talking with each other. It's really cool to see, and I can't thank you enough for providing such a rich learning experience for these kids after school.
You're welcome. I love it. This is probably my favorite thing to do is this podcast. Like I didn't think like when I first started doing it, I was like, I don't know how to do a podcast. Like I've listened to podcasts. That's the only thing I've got. And as we've been going, like it's just been so much fun, especially just to see the growth that these kids have, learning how to communicate with each other and again, like all of their ideas are their ideas. Like I don't tell them who to interview or anything. They come up with who they want to interview, or if they don't have someone they want to interview or like a topic they want to talk about, they come up with that on their own. And I'll listen in, and usually I'll just provide like, hey, did you think about this? Yeah. Did you think about that? And that usually I just get like pose guiding questions, but they're the ones who come up with all of it.
Sure. No, it's very meaningful for them to have that level of choice in what they do, and their brains are firing like nothing else when they're coming up with these ideas and these questions, I'm sure. What's the audience for this podcast? Do you have a lot of students that are listening?
I think so. Usually we'll have teachers that will play it, and it's kind of sad because it's one computer showing, so it just says one audience. But like, I mean, we've got classes of like at least I know 5th grade and 6th grade definitely show them, or at least try to play it every week, and so that's like 30 kids per class right there. So that's a lot of listens. But so it's really aimed at students, and teachers are listening as well, and I'm sure parents are listening and parents too. Also. So we'll have like so far 20. It's pretty small, but like every year I've noticed that it's gotten bigger and bigger the more the longer that we've been doing it. So I'm hoping it continues to grow, and hopefully eventually like the whole community will be listening because it's their students that are running this basically.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. Well, thank you for the great work you're doing with them, and this was a real thrill.
Oh, well, thank you for coming and talking about this. Like, this has been really fun. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Supercast. Remember, education is the most important thing you'll do today. We'll see you out there.